All right, well, it's a pleasure to welcome Andy Hazard, Vice President of Manufacturing Solutions at AT&T, to our closing keynote session here, where we're going to talk about some of the cybersecurity concerns that are wrapped up in this larger conversation around 5G monetization. So throughout the program today, we've heard a lot of discussion around delivering enterprise digital transformation as sort of the key way that operators are going to make money off of 5G. In this session, as I said, we're going to focus on the cybersecurity implications of that. So Andy, to get started, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experience working in the manufacturing sector for AT&T in terms of, at that initial conversation you have with a potential customer, what kind of questions or concerns do they articulate to you around 5G security, both at kind of a system level and in terms of the data that's moving across the network?
Yeah, Sean, well, thanks for having me. Great to see you. So many of our clients today, as we talk about this transition into 5G, there's many security considerations that they're still trying to sort out, especially as we look at the expansion of the connected devices. It's really clear that the theme of protecting the data, regardless of where it's stored or the communication channel that it travels, it's one of the biggest concerns that we hear that our customers are trying to tackle. Data privacy and managing the security of that data that's accessed by the mobile endpoints are also top of mind for all of our customers. And so there's a lot of efforts around securing the data at rest, in motion, and then being responsive to all the data privacy requirements. And as we look at security in this new 5G enabled world, it's all about protecting one of the most valuable assets for our businesses and our customers, which is data and data and more data.
So if we could take a look at 5G NR from sort of the standard perspective, as this went through the 3GP process and became finalized, compared to LTE, there is enhanced security that's just baked into 5G. So if you're delivering standard compliant 5G, it's inherently going to be more secure than the predecessor generation of cellular. But I guess if I was an enterprise buyer, that's kind of an opaque statement. It's kind of difficult to understand. So I'm curious, just what else do you see operators as needing to do to really kind of ensure and help their business customers understand that these 5G enabled processes are safe and resilient?
Sure. Yeah. And I think you made a great point as far as sort of the legacy cellular environment. So as we look at 5G, solution providers are embedding security into the network architecture. 5G network operators are also building security into their networks. And so, for example, to your point of 3GPP, those standards are part of the focus that we look at as operators and as providers. When you look at 5G, this new era of security with encryption on the IMSI to protect that network data traffic over the 5G radio networks is also an important security element. And there's so many improvements, as you said, from 3G and 4G LTE, where security in those cases were more of an overlay versus embedded into the network and those standards. But there's still work to be done to protect the data. And I think that we look at it as what was equivalent of the early public cloud adoption, right? So there's a shared security responsibility model that we see with 5G. Enterprises shift many of those network functions to the carriers, right? Which ultimately brings a higher enterprise grade security level. Similar to what we saw with the cloud shift, there's a responsibility of the network providers and the cloud infrastructure to comply with all the regulatory standards, right? To provide continuous monitoring of the data on that network. But there's also a requirement of the enterprises to provide the security on their own devices and their own endpoints and the data within those endpoints. And so we see things like identity access management, data protection suites that are needed to complement the physical security of the on-premise equipment, especially when we look at things like multi-access edge computer MEC. So it's a hybrid, right, of the carrier grade and what's embedded in the network and what has to happen at the physical endpoints.
So you've mentioned endpoints, and maybe we could stick with this manufacturing example. When we think about bringing 5G to bear in that type of environment, a lot of it has to do with connecting physical assets like machinery, robotics, cameras, other types of sensors. So, new endpoints that are different from the endpoints we're accustomed to, where it's me holding a phone. So I'm curious, what specifically do carriers and their customers need to do in terms of adapting set of cybersecurity best practices that kind of lend itself to this new IoT world where you've got a very strong link between cyber and physical types of assets?
Yeah, so we look at it probably in three areas. The first would be around machine learning, artificial intelligence, advanced analytics. So this explosion, right, of IoT devices on 5G ultimately expands the attack surface. And so security design really has to incorporate automation to ensure that you can apply those security policies dynamically and get it at the scale of what we're seeing with the network. Utilize AI and ML, other analytic capabilities to improve rapid detection and response of the new threats, because these networks are becoming more complex and the number of devices connecting to those networks grows. So you have to be very nimble in that approach. The second would be around software-defined networks with security. I think as you see more connected devices added to the manufacturing ecosystem, attackers have a greater opportunity to exploit those vulnerabilities and grab that very valuable data. So software-defined networking is a security enabler. With the increase of applications developed, SDN allows embedding that security into the design and architecture of the network. This improves the opportunity to put policy enforcement and anomaly detection and mitigation. It also allows applications to block malicious activity on the network and enforces policies across the security services. Again, rapidly implementing those capabilities. And then the third would be virtual network functions. So virtualization is an excellent opportunity to implement across a big distributed network very quickly. And because of this, enterprises can spin up security components like firewalls and push policies to many devices very efficiently. We also see virtual security controls to allow technologies to help prevent attackers' lateral movements. You can apply micro perimeters to protect applications, and then utilize SDNs for mitigating threats. So those would be three areas I think that cross the IoT and the physical elements around security.
If I could ask a follow-up there, Ande, we've heard a lot of discussion today around the role of strong ecosystems in terms of operators successfully selling 5G into verticals. You need to partner up with people that might have expertise in that vertical, and to degrees you need to meet your customers where they are in terms of partnering with hyperscalers. And then you've got ISVs and system integrators and just all these new stakeholders that are in the equation. From a security standpoint, whether that's the deployment of the network, the operation of it, or even the kind of governance of who controls which bits, does that make things more complicated than just, if it were AT&T to sell, here's your entire turnkey solution from AT&T? When you involve these other stakeholders, does that make the calculus a little different?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that as you navigate all of those players in the ecosystem, you have to be conscientious of how do you plan it from an architecture perspective, a security perspective. And I think one of the practices that we see is a role of a consultant element to help to have a roadmap, right? Because if you dive deep into this quickly without a structure around it, it can have a lot of piece parts, which actually gives you more vulnerability from a security perspective.
All right, so now if we could get back to this point around monetization of 5G, maybe you can take us through some of the use cases that AT&T is opening up for customers by bringing 5G networks to manufacturing businesses.
Yeah, no, we are seeing really consistent use cases, which is great as far as being able to identify the opportunity, but also then to customize for the specific industry. But in manufacturing, we are seeing vision systems. Taking a very big use case with 5G around quality control and employee safety. We're seeing autonomous guided vehicles as far as a connectivity platform, and then also data intelligence from predictive maintenance of the factory equipment. I'd even give you a very specific reference. We did a published use case with Ford Motor Company back in fourth quarter of 2021, and it's a great example of kind of bringing that all together. So they have their electric vehicle production facility in Michigan that's going to produce the Ford F-150 Lightning pickup, an all electric vehicle. And we're leveraging 5G and MEC in that facility And some of the use cases that they're going to tap into are around the ultra fast speed, the low latency, and this massive connectivity on the factory floor. They'll be able to leverage the vision systems, the equipment status, material supply chain, automated robotics, and even faster wireless vehicle updates, just to name a few use cases.
So Andy, even just anecdotally on some of these use cases, I would like some commentary. You know, when we think of a vision system for quality control, that seems pretty straightforward in terms of delivering an improved business outcome almost immediately. But just from your experience, is the time to value as fast as it seems like it would be when you implement these systems at some degree of scale in a manufacturing facility?
Yeah, and we're seeing that from our customers, Ford and many others, that that agility that you see from it, right, and the consistency, and you kind of take the human element out of it, right? So you're really in this automated environment that allows for very quick analytics, very quick decision making, and it has actually produced improvements on the supply chain, on the factory floor, on the production line, right? So all of those come into play. And to your point, I would say the manufacturing industry has been automated for a very long time. But if you can do smart automation, if you can actually accelerate that decision making, if you can leverage more connectivity, more pieces of the factory that are automated and connected, I do think it's accelerating that go-to-market capability.
And so now to tie monetization and security together, at some point, even today, does the security of an operator's 5G network and the posture that the operator takes towards security in terms of emphasizing the importance of it in the bigger solution, does that become a competitive selling point that could potentially help you win business in this competitive market?
Yeah, I think as we go back to the comment of this influx of devices connected to 5G, and the idea that we have to take a holistic, multi-layered approach to security to protect that ecosystem and the data assets. What that ultimately becomes, as we talked about in our prior session last year, that's the enterprise's brand, right? That becomes an ability to say that our brand has secured the data that has enabled us to go to market faster. And I think every industry, and particularly in manufacturing, every organization will differ a little bit on what their design needs to be, because everyone's going to have, a specific go-to-market solution, a specific device. They're going to behave differently. As an example, what we produce for automobiles is very different from a security posture than perhaps what you might do in the healthcare industry. But regardless, your ability to design this holistic multi-layer approach around 5G and the go-to-market enablement, that in itself will continue to allow you to put your brand in a competitive place in the market.
So I guess maybe final question here, Andy. Do you feel like, one, the 5G deployments AT&T has in place with enterprise and manufacturing customers, are they delivering the type of value that you could characterize as monetization? Has their investment delivered business value that you can pin to revenue, or I guess not to be pedantic about what monetization means, but are they not spending money that they were spending previously?
I would say they're shifting where their spending's going, right? So the customers we speak with daily are looking to find the right use cases that we talked about, right? Be able to identify that to an ROI, and then they're going to invest in multi-elements of 5G. That could just be the 5G as far as cellular capability, that complements to the MEC, that complements the IT connected devices. So that entire, layering of this capability, that's an investment our customers are making, and they're seeing the results of it as far as a go-to-market strength and brand. And then they're able to shift where they put that investment. Maybe they can dial back on where they had other investments that are no longer needed at the scale that they had, because you can be more optimal with 5G in your environment.
So we've got a lot of enterprise decision makers in our audience today. Any final thoughts around how they should be thinking about cybersecurity as it relates to their 5G investments and their digital transformation strategies?
Yeah, so I think I would take security as a embedded piece, right? As we talked about earlier, it's not a afterthought. It's not an overlay, right? Security considerations, both on in cloud environment, in the 5G environment, in the physical assets. I would say that as we look at the ability to wrap that into the embedded decision-making roadmap, that's the most important thing. And if that is within your own CISO organization, if that is complemented by consulting capabilities to help you with best practices. But I think at the end of the day, that consideration has to go hand in hand so that you have the protection of that ultimate critical data, as we talked about.
Well, great, Andy. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us at the 5G Monetization Forum. Tell us about the work AT&T is doing with its partners and customers, and share your perspective on this important topic.
Thanks so much for having us.